scenarios. I'm also recording this seminar for anybody who isn't able to join, so we can post this on our YouTube channel later on. And just a quick check-in at the poll here, sharing the results. We have folks from Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, Richmond Public Schools, VCUs on the line, folks in the Virginia Department of Education, and several folks from outside of the MERC region, which is great. We're really excited to have you here. And then this question about, has bullying increased since the onset of COVID-19 in PK-12 schools? Nearly everybody either agreed or strongly agreed to this item. And so we'll be curious to see how this reflects in the research and what this looks like from your practice. And I'll just say in case anybody here is not familiar with MERC, the Metropolitan Educational Research Consortium is a research practice partnership between the School of Education and VCU, and we have 5 school district partners. We work with Chesterfield, Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, and Richmond Public Schools. And we also frequently partner with the Virginia Department of Education on various projects. So we're really excited to have folks here to share about what we learned and to stimulate some conversation on this important topic of bullying. So let's dig into the seminar. So again, thank you for joining us today. My name is David Knapp. I'm the Associate Director of MERC. We also have Sarah Bazemore with us from the Virginia Department of Education, who's going to be talking about this from more of like a state policy perspective, and also some of the implications for school counselors and other school-based mental health providers. And then we have Brian Maltby and Lisa Winn from Hanover County Public Schools who are with us today. So we're going to be providing information related to bullying from 3 different perspectives. But first, I wanted to get started with the research and policy brief, an overview of some of the findings related to that. Again, that's linked in the resource document that's provided in the chat, which I'm going to throw in one more time in case someone's just joined us here. But the sources of information for that research and policy brief included peer-reviewed research literature that's published since 2020. So we wanted to only focus on literature that was published since the onset of COVID-19. Additionally, we included some publicly available data from Child Trends from the National Center for Education Statistics. But one of the points that we make in the research brief, and something that's one of the takeaways from this, is that there is not great current data on what bullying trends have actually looked like since the onset of COVID, and we have some recommendations that are related to that. And then finally, we also did a review of policy documents from the Virginia Board of Education, Virginia Department of Education, and then we did a review of MERC Division school board policies to look at what this looks like at the state and regional level. So we're going to be sharing findings from each of those. This research and policy brief, and what also is what's going to guide this first part of the seminar, is structured around answering 5 different questions. First, what is the nature of school bullying since the onset of COVID-19? How has this changed? How has this unique historical moment changed what we know about bullying and what we're seeing bullying? Second, which students have been particularly impacted by bullying since the pandemic? So which student groups have you noticed being particularly impacted by bullying, and what does research show in terms of particular impact? 3, what are some recommended strategies for addressing school bullying since the onset of COVID-19? So specifically, what can schools do to actually address this issue? Number 4, what are current policies in Virginia and the MERC region that are related to addressing school bullying? So what does our policy analysis show? And then what are some of the key takeaways? So at the end of this, we'll share 4 key takeaways and expand a little bit on what are the main things we want to make sure that you take away from this. I'll also share that all of the slides that you're going to be seeing today are also linked in that resource document, so you can get some of these takeaways there as well. But let's start with this question about what is the nature of school bullying since the onset of COVID-19. Folks already kind of shared that in that initial poll question, but I'm wondering if people might just quickly throw something into the chat here. What have you noticed about school bullying since the onset of COVID-19? How is it different in your division or your school if you work in a K-12 setting, or if you're coming from a research or policy perspective, how does it look different in your work? We'll give folks a couple minutes to throw some of those reflections into the chat. Need some responses related to virtual bullying or cyberbullying, that there's more opportunities or ways for kids to virtually and anonymously bully one another. Cyberbullying incidents becoming more prevalent after COVID-19. I remember when I was a high school counselor, which was back in 2014, so I've been out of the game for a little while. Cyberbullying was complicated to deal with back then, so I can't even imagine from a practice perspective what that looks like. Parents fueling the issue on social media, absolutely. Some of the research that we're going to cite in this report is about also how limited parent oversight tends to be over their child's online behavior. More incidents of cyber virtual bullying occurring more often with younger children. That's really interesting. We're going to talk about some trends in elementary school during this conversation as well. Keep throwing some of those ideas into the chat about how you've observed bullying changing since the onset of COVID-19. Let's see what the research shows. So at the onset, I want to share bullying research still largely focuses on the earliest, most disruptive days of the pandemic. And so in that sense, it has not entirely caught up with what the actual experiences are in schools. It's the same thing with some of the other research that we've been able to cite most recently since the pandemic, where a lot of the data collection happened in 2020, 2021, those academic years where routine data collection was disrupted. So because of that, what are some of the implications for the quality of the data that's coming out? And so some of the data actually shows a decrease in bullying, but that is pretty clearly deflated by the disrupted data collection that happened at the beginning of COVID-19. One kind of interesting piece or thing to take away from that, though, is that cyberbullying may have initially decreased due to the need for physical connection. So that showed up in the research a good bit, that for cyberbullying to occur, oftentimes there would need to be some sort of physical connection, or at least some sort of physical kind of like proximity between students in a school setting. And whenever that gets disruptive, it could potentially disrupt cyberbullying as well. But kind of to Beth's point in the chat, sometimes things will actually emerge online that end up trickling over into schools later on. So that physical and cyberbullying connection are definitely persistent. But there could have been actually a potential decrease initially. Students are more likely to report an increase in bullying, especially cyberbullying, than educators. So some of the research that we cited asked students and educators what their perceptions of changes in bullying have been since the onset of the pandemic. Students are more likely to report a perceived increase in bullying than educators were, especially in terms of cyberbullying. And that really speaks to the difficulty in actually detecting cyberbullying and bullying in online environments, which speaks to this final point about like there's a clear need for educator training related to detecting bullying in online school environments. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the strategy section. But that's just sort of what the research landscape is showing in these first years after the pandemic about how bullying has actually changed since that time. Now, transitioning here, what have you noticed about which student groups have been particularly impacted by bullying since the pandemic? Anything related to their demographic background based off of gender, socioeconomic status, disability status, race, ethnicity, coming from a rural, urban, suburban environment? Throw it in the chat. What have you noticed about student groups that have been particularly impacted by bullying? And while folks are adding that to the chat, I'm going to address this very good point by L. Gordon and I think in Henrico or Hanover about everything being considered bullying. This really speaks to the importance of very clearly defining it and having that kind of shared language around what actually constitutes bullying. And so students with disabilities, English learners, LGBTQ students being particularly impacted by bullying since the onset of the pandemic. Okay, let's see how this shows up in the research as well. So 4 different categories that really emerge from our findings. So based off of students' age, based off of gender, based off of race, and based off of sexual orientation and gender identity. So we'll start with this conversation around age. And this speaks to what somebody was doing in the chat earlier. Upper elementary students have particularly been sharing higher reports of cyberbullying among their peers. So there's been more detection of cyberbullying or more reporting of cyberbullying among upper elementary students. I think that there's a variety of potential explanations for that. One of them potentially being what somebody shared in the chat about what's the actual definition of what constitutes bullying or not. Upper elementary students might just be starting to engage with some of these online environments. And it might be that they're interpreting some behaviors as cyberbullying when that's not always the case. But it could also be that because they're just getting involved in some of these online environments, that they are engaging in behaviors that don't really represent like building a strong community or appropriate etiquette whenever you're using social media and that sort of thing. So those could be some potential explanations, but some of the studies that we looked at that were comparing this based off of age cross-sectionally showed that upper elementary students were more likely to report cyberbullying than some of their middle or high school age peers. In terms of gender, research was showing that male students are more likely to report perpetration of bullying since the pandemic, and that female and non-binary students are more likely to report being a victim of bullying and perceiving bias-based bullying. So there was a good bit of research that was really specifically focused on this idea of bias-based bullying, of feeling bullied based off of your identities. And so female and non-binary students are more likely to report being a victim of bullying and perceiving that it's been based off of some sort of perceived bias by the perpetrator of bullying. In terms of race, this showed up in this research as well as some of the mental health research that we've done, that Asian students have perceived particular increases in bias-based bullying since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, we published a systematic literature review of all the empirical research that was published in the immediate year following the COVID-19 pandemic onset about the mental health impacts of the pandemic on PK-12 students. And this very clearly showed up in that research as well, that Asian students felt more targeted online for bullying and in person for bullying, that they were perceiving more bias-based bullying and harassment, that they had their mental health significantly impacted by that, increases in anxiety, depression, stress, that sort of thing. So this is showing up in the research again, that Asian students are particularly perceiving these increases in bias-based bullying. So this is something for educators and administrators to keep an eye on for sure. And then sexual orientation and gender identity. LGBTQ students are more likely, they tend to be the most likely to perceive bullying before and after COVID-19. So an important distinction with this is that they were the highest likely reporting group prior to the pandemic, and they're the highest likely reporting group after the pandemic. So it's not necessarily that the data is clearly showing that there's been an increase in bullying by LGBTQ students from the sources that we found, but that they remain the highest, most likely in terms of perceiving being bullied before and after the pandemic. So LGBTQ students may be in particular need of support in terms of bullying prevention efforts. Right. So what are some of the recommended strategies for addressing school bullying since the onset of COVID-19? Here are some of the main buckets that came up from the research that are outlined in that research brief. Related to school climate, related to classroom practices, related to school and family outreach, and then related to professional development. So in terms of addressing this from a school climate perspective, it's important to routinely assess school climate. So that came up very clearly in the research. This is also something that shows up in state policy related to bullying prevention, that it's important for schools to assess their efforts or routinely survey their efforts about bullying prevention in the schools. So understanding school climate requires routinely assessing what the climate is in the school. And I fully recognize just the challenges of trying to implement another survey. I know that there's efforts at the state level for school climate surveying in an ongoing way. We do ongoing stakeholder surveying in some of our school divisions. If you're interested in having conversations about how to effectively integrate some of these kinds of assessments, I would be very interested in having that conversation. Please let me know. But it's important to make sure that you're routinely assessing this. And whenever you're considering things related to school climate, it's important to prioritize student voice, since they're kind of the key stakeholders in the school. Family voices and faculty and staff voices are also really critical to include, but student voice should really be driving the conversation around school climate. What is it like for them to actually experience being in the school, especially when it comes to things like bullying? And when you're focused on school climate, there's kind of two things that occur according to the research. One is that it can help if you have a positive, nurturing school climate where students feel a sense of belonging and a sense of connection with trusted adults in the school. It tends to reduce the amount of actual bullying that's happening in the school, while simultaneously making students feel more comfortable to actually report bullying whenever they do see it. So it's kind of coming at it from two different angles. Importantly, school climate came up in our research related to suicide prevention and chronic absenteeism. So anything to address school climate is a worthwhile effort according to the research that we've summarized for this. In terms of classroom practices, a lot of this has to do with social emotional learning. So social emotional lessons in the classroom that are focused on bullying need to also address digital citizenship. And this makes me think back to my time as a high school counselor, the kind of conversations we had with students around their interactions with others online, the implications for bullying, the implications even for suicidality, which is still the second leading cause of death among 12 to 18-year-olds. But also, I think about this in terms of that earlier statistic around upper elementary students being the most likely to perceive cyberbullying, right? So addressing digital citizenship is really important to incorporate into social emotional learning lessons, and really starting that at the elementary level to kind of anticipate some of those spikes that happen in terms of perceived bullying. From a school and family outreach perspective, it's important to encourage parent monitoring of online activity. One of the studies that we cited in the report showed that only 22% of the parents in their sample were actively monitoring the online activity of their children. So anything that could be done to make sure that parents have awareness of what their children are doing online is an important piece of helping to curb bullying, especially cyberbullying. And then parents should be offered to invite input on bullying policies. So whenever they're considering like how bullying policies are impacting their child, it's important to invite that parent voice. And then, again, that kind of speaks to the school climate piece. And then professional development. And I've borrowed a photo of my colleague, Brian Maltby. This is from our MERC conference a couple of years ago. He's going to be presenting here in just a minute. But professional development related to school bullying really needs to focus on detecting and preventing bullying in online environments. So, but that also includes, like, if you have a virtual school environment, what does that look like? How do you detect it? But also, how does bullying sometimes start online and then eventually manifest in a physical form or a social or verbal form in a school environment as well? So professional development needs to definitely focus on this aspect as well. And then finally, let's focus on what the current policies in Virginia and MERC school divisions are that are related to addressing bullying. And we'll start at the state level. And this is just an overview. Sarah's going to give us a more kind of detailed look at some of the current policies that are related to this. But the Virginia Board of Education has the model policy to address bullying in Virginia public schools from back in 2013. And here's some of the key things that emerged from that guidance. They offer clear definitions, or I call on schools to offer clear definitions for what's meant by bullying. I could say that in some of our routine assessment practices and surveying practices in some of our partnering school districts, we've really tried to hone in on, like, what is an actual workable definition of bullying and its varying forms, right? Like, it might not make sense to just describe bullying, but you really need to drill down on, like, what is cyberbullying? What does it look like? The intentionality of it. When does it go from sort of playful teasing to actual bullying? So having an actual clear definition is very important from a school policy standpoint. Also, it's important to use evidence-based whole school prevention strategies, and some of those are detailed in the research and policy brief. We have some example policies or example practices detailed in there, including some relevant links that might be useful. Also, as I mentioned, it's important to do annual surveys to evaluate your efforts. So if you're going to be implementing any kind of anti-bullying strategy in your schools, how do you know it's actually effective? What are those what's the evidence of that? Again, if you'd like to have any conversations about how to effectively measure that, I'd be eager to have those discussions. And then to clearly outline procedures for investigation, response, and parent notification. And there's been some recent developments at the state level related to the timing of parent notification that Sarah's going to talk about in her remarks as well, including some of the implications of that. In terms of the MERC region, so looking at the school board policies in our region, drilling down a little bit more, how do they apply some of the state guidance? What do all of our MERC divisions do, and what do some of our MERC divisions do? And again, additional details are provided in the actual brief. But let's start with this conversation around what do all MERC divisions do? So all of our MERC divisions offer clear definitions in their policies and codes of conduct, and that includes what are the consequences of bullying and what are the processes for reporting it? How do you actually go about reporting bullying if you perceive it to be happening? And all of them in their codes of conduct and their school board policies include some discussion about character education related to bullying. It's possible that some of that might need to be updated based off of the current circumstances of this new climate post-COVID and what things look like in an increasingly online world. But I'll include some sort of discussion about character education related to bullying. And then some of our MERC divisions explicitly address cyberbullying in their technology use agreements. Not all of them do. So it's important to make sure that that's sharply articulated. Some of them require annual staff development on bullying. And one of our main takeaways from conducting this research is that the nature of bullying is constantly changing as technology changes. AI is this, kind of new frontier. We have separate research that we published related to AI and how it impacts public schools. What are going to be some of the potential implications for bullying related to that, right? So annual staff development related to bullying is really important. And then some school divisions will explicitly recognize October as Bullying Prevention Month. I remember, again, in my time as a high school counselor, we had programming that was specifically around bullying prevention in the month of October. I think it was you're supposed to wear orange on a particular day, and I helped kind of lead those efforts in our school. And it was just important for us that bullying prevention is important year round, but it's just an opportunity to kind of level set at one particular time of the year where everybody's really focused on this idea of bullying prevention. Okay, so based off of all that information, what are some of the key takeaways? What are the main things that we want to make sure that you know based off this research and policy analysis? So here's 4 takeaways that we think are particularly important to gain from this research. And again, we elaborate on this in the report. The first is that it's important for us to have more updated data. The data that's included in research right now, largely, like I said, captures that kind of snapshot right at the onset of the pandemic, and it's potentially has this artificial decrease. We need to more clearly measure how bullying, particularly cyberbullying, has changed since COVID. We don't effectively know that right now. And so any efforts to be able to really capture that information and to make that information publicly available, I'm saying that as a researcher and how valuable it is to have that data, especially if we can disaggregate that by student demographics so we can know about those particularly impacted groups, that's very important. So really trying to push for having updated data related to bullying. All right. Mental health support. We at MERC have a separate study, like a larger study that's focused on supporting mental health in schools that was commissioned in 2021. And I remember having conversations with our school division partners when we were deciding on that topic, and somebody said that mental health is the next pandemic in schools. In a lot of ways, it's turned out to be true. There's been significant increases in anxiety, stress, depression, and that manifests in things like increased chronic absenteeism and bullying, right? So the more that I sort of conduct this research and lead this team, the more I think that everything kind of comes back to this idea of mental health. So any kind of bullying prevention effort needs to really simultaneously focus on mental health support and leveraging some of the school-based mental health providers in the schools, like school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists. And we have some folks from that mental health study team who are on this call that I know are very well equipped for that work. So making sure that, for example, school bullying is something that has discipline codes associated with it, still looping in the school counselor, even if it is an administrative decision, but just making sure that the counselor is a part of those conversations and can assist with any kind of intervention effort. Third takeaway, emphasizing online bullying, which is a very clear takeaway from the research that cyberbullying is something that really is coming up frequently in research related to this, prioritizing cyberbullying, digital citizenship, bullying in online school environments for faculty PD. That being said, one of the main gaps that we're seeing in research right now is that it's not very clear how physical bullying, social bullying, and verbal bullying has changed since the pandemic and the research that we summarized for this. So it's really important for us to get a better understanding of what that looks like in our school divisions, and I'm hoping we can have some discussion around that today. And then finally, engaging multiple stakeholder voices. I can't say this enough. This is something it's one of our foundational principles in MERC is multiple perspectives. It's important to gather perspectives of students, faculty, staff, and families about physical, social, and verbal bullying. This is part of the school climate piece. It's part of updating any kind of school policies related to bullying, making sure that we have parent voice incorporated in that and student voice incorporated in that. And again, any kind of routine assessment related to this or surveying related to this should really include all these different stakeholder perspectives of your students, of your families, and your faculty and staff. So those are 4 key takeaways that we wanted to share. This is a QR code to be able to access the actual full report. Again, there's the resource document that's shared in the chat that would really encourage you to dig into some of those resources more, whether it's the the research brief or the podcast episode, or the various other research briefs and related research and resources that we've shared in there. And please share your own resources in there, because again, the research on this is limited, and folks have considerable expertise related to this. We want to make sure that we leverage. So that's an overview of our research on this topic. And I'm really eager now to pass the microphone or the stage over to Sarah from the VDOE. So Sarah, I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share your screen and your slides if that works okay for you. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Sarah Bazemore. I'm the school counseling specialist in the Office of Specialized Student Services. So in case you didn't hear, our office was recently, our name was changed. We were changed to Specialized Student Services. So we often refer to ourselves as OSS, and now we're OSSS. So that's just something to know. If you see an email from us and we say OSSS, it's not a typo. So thrilled to be here. I'm going to pull up my slide deck. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and give the kind of disclaimer, I guess, for lack of a better word, that while I have some information to share, and I'm going to be talking about policy somewhat, I can't promise I have all the answers. So, if you ask a question today that I'm not able to answer, I will definitely, and am happy to consult with other folks on my team or at the agency to find that answer for you. Because I by no means consider myself an expert on bullying prevention, but I definitely think it's something, that school counselors, as well as any other school-based mental health professional, play a key role in. But I recognize that there's multiple perspectives and voices that go into this. So, it's just an important conversation for sure. All right. So here are some highlights from the Virginia Department of Ed. Hopefully, most of you are aware of this change in Virginia code that occurred after last year's General Assembly as a result of the Senate Bill 1072. This was a big change. It changed the requirement for schools to contact or notify the parent of any student involved in an alleged incident of bullying within 24 hours. I believe prior to that, it was 3 days. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. But that was a big change, and we've heard from a lot of folks in the field with concerns or questions about how to navigate this and what this looks like in practice. And we're doing our best to assist and provide some guidance on that. But we are also recognizing the fact that, as David pointed out, we do have a policy, a model policy document that was developed in 2013 that is now 10 years old. So that needs to be updated. So this code is really expediting that process. So we will be updating that model policy. It's a priority for our office this year. And we'll definitely be offering some additional information and supports around this code and this new requirement. I'm going to go back to it real quick because I feel like it's an important scenario to share with you all. As you may or may not know, one thing that happens often at the department is we get phone calls from parents. And I recently got a phone call from a parent whose child was experiencing some pretty significant cyberbullying. And she was hesitating on whether or not to contact the school because she wasn't sure what would happen if she did. And she was really concerned about, if I call and I report this, it could make things worse for my child. And so we were kind of talking about next steps and what she could do, because it was definitely a pretty aggressive case of cyberbullying and honestly some physical bullying too. And it needed to be addressed and the school needed to be informed. But something that I kind of thought about as I was talking to her was, if she calls and shares the names of these students with administrators, there's an obligation here because of this code that they then contact parents. And could that make things worse for the student? And so I think sometimes being upfront with our parents about that and saying, if you call and you share this is our next step, is important, because maybe they still want to call and report, but they want you to be aware that it's occurring, but they don't necessarily want to be the one to identify the students involved. Depending on the situation, the scenario, the students involved, there's just so many variables, right, that impact our next steps. So I think being transparent with our parents about this code is really important, so that they are aware of what will happen if they when they call. I hope that makes sense. So some considerations for schools that we've already sort of started to develop around alignment with this code is ensuring that a system is developed for how, when alleged bullying incidents are reported, how they're addressed and communicated to the parents that are involved. So making sure that your staff is aware of this change in code, and that, as well as that families, students, and staff understand the different types of bullying and the definition of bullying. You know, I know a lot of at times the word bullying is misused, right? So we want to make sure that folks understand that definition, that it's clearly communicated to all our stakeholders, so that when they use that term, they're using it from a place of knowledge and understanding. Staff should also be trained on what to look for as warning signs, and they should also be aware of who might be more at risk. And then lastly, all school staff need to know what to do as well as what not to do when bullying behaviors occur or are reported to them. Those are just some items to think about at a systems level, to make sure that we're doing, not just because of the change in code, but because it's what's best for kids in preventing bullying. Virginia does have an official definition of bullying, which I have here for you. This is in code. I'm not going to read it to you because that's insulting, but here it is. I don't know if this is a kid-friendly definition. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's not, but it is how we define it, you know, in Virginia code, which is legislation. So it's important to know how it lives and breathes there. But then before we kind of move forward in kind of talking about some of the best practices and the resources that are available to bullying prevention, I wanted to share, I know you've just got a lot of great data from David regarding, you know, the results of COVID, but there's some awesome data out there as well from the results of our statewide climate and working conditions survey that's co-done by DCJS and the Virginia Department of Education. And I wanted to share some of the results of that with you as well, because I think this is a really fascinating set of data, and it touches on a lot of things. If you've looked at the data before, you know this, other than just bullying, but there's some really great information in there specifically around bullying. So this is the data from the 2022 school climate survey. And these are the state numbers. You can access, and I'll show you how to access the report specific for your school or your school division. But one of the questions on the survey asks students and teachers, what are the reasons students are bullied or experience bullying? And they have options to choose between the options that you see there. I'm curious what you think students said was the #1 reason they experience bullying, or anyone experience bullying. You can put it in the chat. What do you think was the students' #1 reason that they experience bullying? We have a lot of different answers. Okay, I'll show you. So these were the perceptions of teachers and students. So as you can see, our overall, our teachers are a little bit off on what students are saying is actually the reasons that bullying is occurring. The #1 reason is physical appearance, closely followed by sexual orientation. We're not totally off. I would say that we've completely missed the mark, but it's definitely interesting to see where the variability is between what teachers see and what students see. Because teachers, I feel like it's a more even set of numbers here than compared to the students, where we see a little bit more of a peak. All right, here's another really interesting set of data. Bullying was reported as a problem at this school by what percent of students, what percent of teachers, and what percent of school staff. So school staff, just so you know, includes like your school counselors, folks that aren't assigned a classroom. So that is, there's a lot of folks that fall into that realm. So that can also be administrators. So what do you think the percentage, what percent of students do you think reported bullying as a problem at their school? You can drop that in the chat again. All right, let's see. So bullying was reported as a problem in schools by 36.4%, so lower than what a lot of you thought. Teachers said it was about 33, school staff 28. That was statewide numbers. Now it's interesting when you dive into division numbers or even dive down further into school numbers, sometimes it's there's a lot of discrepancy there. So I encourage you, if you haven't looked at your school or division report, to do so. According to the 2022 School Climate Survey, this percent of students said that they slightly to strongly agree that adults take action to address bullying. So what percent of students surveyed and during 2022 said that they thought that adults took action when bullying occurred? What do you think? Drop it in the chat. I promise we're almost done with this, but I think this information, this is so important for us to be aware of. So this to me is, I think, one of the more staggering kind of set of statistics where we see the largest change. So school staff, we really feel like staff does jump in and address bullying. Teachers felt like it was a little bit less than that, but our students are really only about a little bit more than half of our students are saying that they feel like our adults take action, which to me, that's really concerning. So as I said, this is, you can access the reports for your school or your school division. If you're an elementary school, you don't have student responses because students are not included in this survey, unfortunately, but you do have the staff data. So you can take a look at that and you can access, and I'll drop this in the chat, you can access all of those reports there. They're public information. But one thing that I'll share as well is one of the questions we often ask is of teachers and school staff is if they see these results, if these results have been shared with them by their administrator. And most school staff say they've never seen these results or they didn't even know that this was available to them. So I really encourage you to bring this data to the awareness of your school staff, have conversations about it, do a data walkthrough kind of like what we did, but drill it down to your division or your particular school, because it can bring up some really great conversations about what our students are sharing with us. All right, as promised, I'm going to give you some resources that I hope are valuable. We just released a newsletter, and if you didn't receive that, I will give you information so that you can receive it in the future, but show you kind of what it looks like. We send out a bulletin every month with information about a theme or a topic that's relevant for that month. So of course, October, we focused in on bullying, had some information about that change in code, as well as some other stuff here that I'm going to kind of talk about in a minute. But this is a great place for you to find updates and information from our office, specific to whatever the theme is for that month, but then also we share any other updates coming out of our office or out of the agency that we feel like are relevant to folks that are in that Office of Student Services. But we also developed some resources for bullying prevention that are kind of updated to kind of assist in some of the concerns or challenges that we've heard divisions are facing with the result of the change in code. So we have posters that have some definitions of bullying that are here, as well as, we were talking about making sure parents are aware of what to do when, come on, you can do it, when bullying is reported. So we have a breakdown of, come to it here, kind of a flow chart for parents that may or may not be appropriate depending on what your division policy and what this looks like, but it could be a template that you use to edit or tweak based off of the systems you have in your school. And then we also have a handout for teachers as well. One of the things that we've heard from a lot of the students that we've had conversations with around bullying is there's just a lot of variability in the way that teachers respond when bullying is reported to them. Some teachers are really great and know exactly what to do, and other teachers, they report they either make it worse because maybe they may force the student who's experiencing the bully to talk to the student that is being reported as the bully or is displaying the bullying behavior. We know that that's not best practice, or they ignore it. So, we feel that it's really important that we work with our teachers and that they know the expectation of what to do when bullying is reported. And just so everyone marks their calendar, October 18th is Unity Day, and we hope that folks will be wearing orange. And then lastly, as I shared earlier, and as David pointed out, we have a set of policies that need to be updated. The last time they were updated was in 2013. So we are in the process of updating those now, and we are looking for feedback. So there are 2 feedback forms for practitioners, teachers, school staff, to share their thoughts around what should be included in the updated guidelines. But then also we want to hear from students, so we have a feedback form for collecting that information as well. So any help that you can give us, or any contributions to that is more than appreciated, because your voices are just so important in the development of that. As promised, if you are not currently subscribed to our newsletter and would like to do so, I'm going to drop the link in our chat so that you can stay connected to all the things that are happening out of our office. And then please mark your calendar for Virginia Kindness Week, February 11th through 17th this year. Information will be shared with folks via the newsletter about that. So please make sure that you're marking your calendars. Sorry, that was fast and furious, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to do my best to respond.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll say we'll transition to our folks from Hanover, but we'll have question opportunity for everybody at the end. And the forms, all the great links that Sarah just shared are available in that resource document and the slides that are embedded in there. But also you'll get an email tomorrow. They'll invite you to complete an evaluation of your experiences at the seminar, where you could also get a certificate for completion. But also we'll make sure to include the links for you to provide input on those model policies, because there's a lot of collective expertise on this call. So we want to make sure that we leverage that. So thank you so much, Sarah. And now pleased to introduce Brian Maltby and Lisa Winn from Hanover to share about their behavior coaches.
Yeah, thanks, David. And we'll close the show before questions. And so I think it's really interesting the way this is set up to be research, policy, and practice. As you heard from the first 2, we'll be sharing the practice side of it. So I am Brian Maltby, oversee discipline for Hanover County. Awesome to see you guys today. I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Lisa Winn. I'm the Positive Behavior Support Coordinator here in Hanover County.
Right, and Lisa will be sharing her slide deck in just a moment, and I'll be cueing her when to fast forward. We're going to be talking about behavior coaches today, then just some general thoughts about discipline, about the why we're doing what we're doing, and then what we're doing to help combat discipline, and then overall a sense of behavior. I do want to start, if Lisa, once you're able to project, if you just go straight to the second slide. The second slide asks 2 questions, and so we're going to ask you to drop in chat just what or false, so we can get to know you guys just a little better. And I'll combine the 2 questions into one here. But the questions are: what was the behavior concern from your classroom or school setting last year, the behavior of most concern? And then what behaviors are you worried about this year. And so as we talk about our behavior coaches and the role they play in schools in combating bullying and all behavior that is distracting from instruction, we'd love to hear from you guys. Like, what are you concerned about this year? Or as you reflect on last year, what was it that was most concerning as you moved into this year? And so we'll give you 30 seconds or so if you could drop some things in chat so we could know where your concerns are. Physical contact, impulsivity, and physical violence. Yeah, we were certainly seeing those. Disrespect, one of the highest codes used, and also one of the most variable in terms of how responses look. Elopement, yeah, especially with our little ones running away. Disrespect, sure. Thank you guys, and please feel free to continue to share. So I'll as it speaks to bullying, I will share with you a question that often comes up as I'm overseeing discipline, both from parents and from the school side is, well, what if it happens entirely outside of school? And if we're talking about cyberbullying, maybe it's online, maybe it's communication through phones. One of the things that we hear from a lot is, yeah, so last night at 8 p.m., I got a series of text messages. All these folks were making fun of me. They were targeting me. The school will get a call from a parent asking, you know, like, what are you going to do about it? And so the question is, you know, if it happens outside of school, can the school react to it? And I would say the answer is yes. Can we discipline for it? Not always. You know, if it has a direct connection to impacting instruction, then the answer is actually yes, we can. So if one of those messages is, when I see you tomorrow in first period, I will X, then of course, absolutely we can. Either way, we can be proactive though. We can be calling those kids in, having conversations. We can be talking to parents. We can find ways to step into the situation and to help any way we can. And I would encourage folks to do that, to be proactive, be positive, and to put an end to kids mistreating one another. Lisa, if you'd go ahead and advance. So what is it that's causing us to do what we're doing? What are we using? So you heard a little bit earlier about the state definition. You heard about SB 1072 or the House Bill 1592, which is the same language, which changed our practice. And then, of course, how we connect to the MERC brief to do what we're doing. And so there's a number of things that were suggested in the MERC brief that we make sure that Hanover is doing an adequate, if not good job of. The state definition as well, you just saw it, and so I won't replay it, but these links are active. You guys will have a copy of our slide deck, and if you want to reach out and look into those, or if you have further questions, you can ask. So in terms of the state definition, that is absolutely what Hanover uses. It's in our code of conduct. It's in our stand up, speak out bully button, which you'll hear about in just a minute. It is shared with parents and kids because there's such a misunderstanding very often of what bullying is, and what we'll hear. And again, I saw by Ms. Bazemore a second ago is it being unkind? Is that actually bullying? You know, and so the question is it repeated? Is there a power difference? Have we attempted to put some things in place that haven't worked, and you've continued and persisted to pick on this one individual for whatever reason? And we do take that into consideration when we're deciding what discipline should look like. Go ahead and go on to the next one if you don't mind. So a couple of things that we are doing in addition to working with the behavior coaches. So we have a Google form, and this is how we are collecting information per that House bill and the Senate bill that requires us to do it within 24 hours, that every school administrator who handles or receives a bullying complaint, and again, there's a copy of that form here linked for you guys to see, has to put in who the complaint was about, who was the target, what actions were done, and how that was resolved. And so we're going to have an ongoing record of that. The bully button, as the shorthand is called, it's a stand up, speak out button. And what we found a few years ago is folks wanted an anonymous way to be able to report from anywhere. So we created this button that's unique to each school and automatically notifies the admin and the counselors that a report has been put in. So any time of day or night, anywhere that you have access, your school has a button that you can access where you can report, this is what was happening to me, this is what was seen. You can't file that report without actually seeing the definition of bullying first, where it says, does the behavior getting ready to report meet this definition? If not, you're still welcome to report to share information, but we try to make it clear from the beginning what that looks like. In addition to this, we were finding that not everybody was accessing it through the school website. So for all of our secondary schools, we created a flyer that's hanging throughout the schools that has a unique QR code for that school. So folks can scan it from, again, anywhere they are and enter. There is, of course, some questions about the anonymity there. If I don't write my name on it, how was the school able to act on it? And so we do encourage folks to leave a contact of some way that we can get a hold of you to better understand, and then do everything we can to protect that person. We also do an SEL survey twice a year where we start asking questions directly. Do you feel safe? Do you have somebody at school or at home you can talk to, an adult? We even ask straight up, would you like to speak to a counselor? We're also doing suicide screeners throughout the year where we're asking kids, how they feel once again directly, and are you considering suicide? And I will tell you, the last few years, man, it's been alarming. We had a dip in suicidality during COVID, and what we found was that was probably directly related to our having direct contact with kids. But since then, again, it's spiking, and in many cases, it's because of how they're treated by peers, and so that the bullying is a huge question. And so, allow me to turn it over to Lisa, who will speak specifically about what our behavior coaches are doing to help combat.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Like I mentioned when I introduced myself, I'm the Positive Behavior Support Coordinator here for Hanover. And my job includes working with tiered behavior support in all of our schools and leading a team of 10 behavior coaches that we are fortunate enough to have as a part of our toolbox here in Hanover County. Probably right before the pandemic, we started to have information that was shared with our school board and shared by our administrators that behavior was increasing in our schools, and our teachers did not always have a deep enough skill set in order to support those behaviors in the classroom. And there were incidences where classrooms were being cleared and students were having to leave while an individual student had to be de-escalated, and so that took time away from instruction and was not a positive part of anyone's school day. So we were fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to build a behavior coaching team in Hanover, which included 10 behavior coaches and me as the coordinator. And in this, we were able to place our coaches in all of our elementary schools and one of our high schools to start, with the idea that we wanted to primarily work on the foundational behaviors at the elementary school level, with the hope that we would build those skill sets for students to have, more tools to behave appropriately as they entered into the secondary settings. So who are these behavior coaches? Who are these fantastic people that we've been able to hire and who are helping us every day to support all sorts of behaviors in our schools? And their backgrounds are very diverse. They are former counselors, former classroom teachers, former special educators. And it's very fortunate for us that they are so diverse, because we always collaborate with each other and lean into each other's strengths in order to do the best job possible to support behavior in our schools. So what is their job? Their job, a traditional behavior coach, we found typically worked with individual students in most cases and helped to de-escalate difficult situations. In Hanover, our primary goal for our behavior coaches is for them to support building teacher capacity, to support difficult behavior, and allow them to have tools to prevent behavior, to support behavior when it occurs, have places and items in their classroom that students can use in order to reset themselves, so that students have to leave the classroom less often and can remain in an instructional environment. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. It was easier when I was clicking for someone else. So 4 categories based on the MERC recommended strategies. The first one here are behavior coaches, how they do their work really that first one, promoting positive school culture, is foundational to the work that they do every day. Every school in Hanover is a VTSS school, of Virginia Tiered Systems of Support School, and they are all promoting PBIS, or positive behavior interventions and support, mindset within our school buildings. Our coaches support system building that can help to prevent or address difficult behaviors. Thinking about schools that I visited just this past week, some schools have incentive systems that are built where students receive little sweet tweet cards to recognize them for meeting school expectations, like being responsible or being safe in their school setting, and really coaching staff and helping coach staff to build a positive classroom culture and really build that mindset that behavior is something that is teachable, that we need to teach our expectations, model for students how to meet those expectations. And so working with adults to improve that mindset. So that first recommendation there is definitely very foundational in the work that all of our behavior coaches do. If I go down below that, thinking about curriculum and classroom practices, this is also a foundational part of the work that our behavior coaches do. They lead learning in trauma-informed practices and restorative practices, but they don't just share the information and move on. They actually will get into the classrooms and help teachers actually implement strategies that support trauma-informed learning, so that they make the learning more practical, more relatable for the teachers to actually have something in their classroom, whether it's a peace corner where a student can go and sit and calm themselves down, possibly with a timer and a fidget, maybe fill out a feedback form related to their what zone they are in, if they are feeling happier now or still sad or upset. We've also have different versions of that in classrooms across the division, whether it's little beaver dam dens that they can open up and pull out a tool to use at their desk, to fidget with, to allow them to remain focused. So students are receiving those I'm sorry, I got choked up. They are receiving these practices and the support they need in the classroom. Restorative practices are also foundational to our work. And with this, our coaches are leading individual student and teacher conversations. They're helping teachers have restorative conversations and asking the right questions. I think about our high school behavior coach who is out with the restorative practice cards, encouraging staff to keep them in their badges so that they can help them to ask the right questions, so that they can rebuild those relationships and repair harm when necessary. And we even have coaches who are skilled at leading restorative circles, so that when students return from suspension, from a difficult situation, they're able to help repair that relationship and allow that student to re-enter the school setting more easily. And of course, classroom expectations and procedures, those are also very foundational. Our coaches will go into the classroom, model those clear expectations, model how to build procedures and routines, because we know all of these things help to build a more consistent and proactive environment for our students to feel comfortable and confident. And with that comes better behavior. On the right-hand side of the slide, school and family collaboration is another piece of the work that our behavior coaches are doing. And I know that's been mentioned throughout this seminar today, that that's an important piece of work when it comes to preventing bullying. And our coaches are a part of parent meetings with students that they support. They are willing to sit with teachers and help them make phone calls, and even get on the phone with the teacher and have a conference call so they can model the types of questions to ask and how to share strategies with families. I was sitting with a behavior coach today who was working on a resource as part of the school's newsletter to share strategies and activities that can be done at home to help students better meet expectations in the school setting. And finally, professional development is another important part of the work that these coaches do. And as we know that there's always more learning to do, especially when we're building that positive mindset and trying to create that culture of kindness and that real positive culture within the school setting. And our coaches lead both staff learning at the school level and division learning. I have several topics listed there that we led in February of last year. We actually had a division initiative to offer multiple sessions related to behavior and building positive school culture. And we had just short of 300 participants. That's 300 teachers who were invested in that learning, and also had the opportunity to join our coaches for a follow-up session where they could talk about the things that they had tried and ask for additional advice and share, maybe have some questions that, or share their experiences so that they could get that feedback and continue to learn. So with that in mind, I've shared a resource that is very valuable to us in Hanover with addressing behavior of all kinds, including bullying. And so you have, and let me go ahead and send it to you, a Jamboard there. And the Jamboard, close this and I will pull it up on my screen. The Jamboard has 4 scenarios that you should have access to and a definition, the bullying definition in the center. So our hope is that you will take a look at these 4 scenarios. And if you are comfortable using the tools to mark on the Jamboard, just try not to cover up the writing in case others are still reading. You can mark your choice for which scenario you think best fits the bullying definition. And then we will move on to a next step once you have done that. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to take a look at the different scenarios. If you're not comfortable marking on the Jamboard, you are welcome to post your response in the chat. But take a look at the different scenarios and decide which one you think most represents our bullying definition. Starting to see some fancy marks on the Jamboard. If that is not your style, feel free to use the chat. Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern. Number 4 seems to be very popular. Give you just a few more seconds to make your decision. Okay, we also have a vote for 3. Okay, so next up, we would like to have you guys broken into some breakout rooms, and I think David is going to handle that for us. And have a quick conversation as to how you might address that bullying situation. I have given you a resource or shared a little bit about our resource that we may use in Hanover to address this situation. What might you do to work through, we'll say, scenario 4 as you address this bullying situation? David, are we all set?
Room should be open.
Okay. So you have just a few minutes to talk as you join your breakout rooms. Did you give them 5 minutes, David?
Yep, everybody's got 5 minutes.
Okay.
2:51 left. All right, everyone should be back.
All right, welcome back. So we are curious if anyone wants to share how that conversation went. What ideas do you have for working through the scenario with Sarah, the middle school student who was having trouble with bullying? Anyone want to share? Oh, come on, you know you want to. Can't think of a, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We discussed that first we might try to figure out who might be responsible for leaving the notes. Check and see when students are allowed to come in that classroom. If there's not an adult present, if there is an adult present, see if they could help figure out who is responsible for actually writing the notes. Might be one of the first steps.
Thank you, Hope. Any other strategies or ideas that you would share? It's a quiet bunch after the breakout room. You guys must have done all your talking in the rooms.
I was saying that once we find out who might have been leaving the notes, then having a conversation with each of those students individually and let them know that, everyone's situation is not like yours per se. And then eventually, on the flip side of that, if there are resources that we can give the family who's in distress, then provide them with those as well to make sure that, they can get, some kind of adequate housing or some type of, if they need resources like hygiene products and things like that, to hook them up with some supports that way.
Thank you.
I thought I saw Kenya unmute there for a second as well.
I did. What we talked about, I'm in an elementary school, and so what we do a lot is community building and relationship building. So it seems like there might be a greater initiative or proactive approach school-wide to talk about promoting respect, what that's look like to build a community and relationships, to build that student up, but also to build community. I know in the middle school, that's a much bigger task, but maybe it's with that block of students, or maybe it's with that grade level, if that's happened. So targeting assistance and proactive measures that way.
Thank you. And I think you bring up a valuable point that resolving the individual situation is very important, but addressing the greater issue, the classroom community issue, or potentially the grade level community difficulty is important. I know in Hanover, we're fortunate enough to have behavior coaches that can help us lead that work, whether it's at the elementary level, coming into some of the morning meetings and modeling some lessons that help students better understand how to build relationships with their peers and how to treat others with kindness. That has been a very effective practice for us in Hanover in working to prevent some of these difficult situations.
Yeah, Lisa, if I could just jump in real quick
course.
as we sort of come to a close. I would say targeting that individual student's behavior and understanding the antecedent there is hugely important to help resolve that particular case, but also understanding more broadly what the culture is in the building, in that individual classroom, or maybe in the entire division, and how comfortable the kids feel reporting the bullying, and also in not doing it or accepting redirection. I would just say one of the things that we've made sure to focus on is the victim or the target. And so not only do we try to resolve it for the person who's doing the bullying, but also the person being bullied. I would just suggest to you is, whether it's an adult or a student that's had the perceived grievance against them, is to check on them, make sure they're doing okay and that they feel supported as well. And so with that, Lisa, if you don't have anything else, I think we're turning it over to David for Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. And I would say that, so this is Q&A, but it's also, I've made this point before, that there's a lot of collective brain power on this call. There's a lot of people who know a lot about this beyond just the folks who have been presenting. So would invite any commentary that people have, strategies that have worked for you, but also questions that you might have as we wrap up today. Any questions or final thoughts or strategies you'd like to share? Okay, well, I'm a big fan of giving people some time back in their day, especially at the end of the day. Thank you so much to Sarah Bazemore, to Lisa Winn, to Brian Maltby for joining this conversation today. Thank you to all of you for being a part of this seminar. You're going to receive an automatic message from me tomorrow morning that invites you to take a very quick survey, just sharing about your experiences here. And then after that, you'll be automatically linked to download a certificate of completion for 1.5 contact hours. This is not the last seminar we're going to be doing. This is the last seminar in this series, but be on the lookout. We'll do seminars related to THC uses, to strategic planning, various other things that are going to be accompanying other research briefs that are coming out soon. And we look forward to staying in touch and learning about the work that you're doing, and grateful for your time and all the work that you do to support students, bullying prevention and otherwise. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.